Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So now let's get started with the last sessions of the NITW bar. We have two main sessions, two sessions coming up. One is the finance and management in abroad, and then we have IT software industries abroad. And the last would be along with that itself, academic research in Canada. So for the first session, the finance and management, I would like to invite Aniruddha. So Aniruddha is a pass out of 2018 batch, and currently he's pursuing his management at IMI Delhi, right? So yeah, Aniruddha, it's all over to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ashwin. So welcome everyone. Welcome to the Finance and Management Summit, Finance and Management in Abroad Summit. For our summit, we have Sai Ganesh, and we have Deepti Reddy. So Sai and Deepti, can we just confirm if microphones are working for you?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Uh,
I'm here.
yes, Deepti, if you can just check, if your mic is working. All right. So, actually, we were also going to have one more person with us, Isha Chaudhary, but she couldn't join us. I think, so let's start. So, we have Sai Ganesh. Sai Ganesh is a graduate of 2012 batch. He is currently working as a senior manager of strategy and business operations at Bristol Myers Squibb. Sai, all over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. First of all, can you hear me? Just want to make sure the audio is fine.
Yes.
Guys, first of all, thanks for organizing this event. I think it's a great initiative by the Bio and IT Work team to have a forum for networking. And for me, it's kind of nice to see some familiar faces and names on Zoom. So with that said, let me quickly share my screen. I kind of put together a slide to kind of guide this conversation. So let me know when you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see this. We can see it.
Awesome. So over the next 7 minutes, I want to kind of talk through how my career has progressed so far. I'll talk through my internship experiences at NIT Warangal, my master's, and the work which I've done over the past 8 to 9 years. So, and after that, I'm obviously happy to answer any questions you may have. So with that said, I am from the 2008-2012 batch of biotech at NIT Warangal. We were, I think, the third batch of biotech in the college. And one of the things which I expect to be asked is whether biotech was by chance or by choice, because for a lot of my classmates, it was one or the other. For me, it was by choice because I had kind of done biotech in my school. And back then, biotech was kind of the new thing which was upcoming in India. So I kind of took a leap of faith by picking NIT Warangal Biotech over a few other options I had. Fast forward to 2010 and 2011 in my second year summer at NIT Warangal, I did an internship at IISc through the Indian Academy of Sciences Fellowship. And I worked as an intern at a lab which did a lot of work in cancer biology. And this kind of was my first experience of working in a lab out of NIT Warangal. So I did a lot of interesting things back then. So I also had a chance to kind of interact with a lot of people who are doing the PhDs over there. And at that time, I decided that I want to be in biotech. I liked what I was doing. And I decided to kind of do research as the next step in my career. Fast forward to 2011, I kind of did the internship again over there, this time in a different lab, but it just kind of helped me solidify that I want to go to the US to do my master's and kind of continue my academic career. So in 2012, I applied for about, I want to say 5 or 6 universities for biotech or bioengineering. And I got an admit from Carnegie Mellon for my MS in biomedical engineering. So a few things which I kind of noticed was different at in grad school was the academic culture was very different. It was heavily research focused as opposed to what I had experienced at NIT Warangal, where you just had to kind of write exams based on whatever you were taught. But in grad school, there was a lot of focus on research. Um, yeah, so I studied there for a couple of years. In grad school, I received kind of partial funding from a professor for my second year in CMU. And at that point, towards the end of my master's, I had a choice to either kind of continue to do a PhD or I could go and look for job opportunities in the industry. And I chose the second option. So I started work at Sanofi in 2014 as Sanofi is a pharmaceutical company for those who are not familiar. And I started working there as an entry-level scientist in 2014. So I worked there for a year, and I still say that it's probably one of my favorite. It's probably the favorite job I've had so far in my career of 5 to 6 years. But one of the things which I noticed, I realized over there was, at least in R&D, it's kind of hard to progress in your career without a PhD. There is a glass ceiling without a PhD, and the ceiling is very low. So at that point, I kind of decided I want to make a switch in my career. So I wanted to stay in the pharmaceutical industry, but instead of tackling the R&D problems, I wanted to focus on more of the business-oriented problems in the industry. So in 2015, I joined Deloitte as a management consultant. So for people who may not be familiar, like Deloitte is a management consulting firm, and what we do in management consulting is like we work, at least I work with a lot of pharmaceutical companies to tackle the various problems they were facing. And this kind of ranged from things like commercial strategy, which is like how do you bring a product to the market, and ranging to things like product pricing, like what is the appropriate price in this product, like how much can people afford, how much can insurance companies afford, and a lot of other things like that. So that's what I did for about 3 to 4 years. And along the way, what I realized was that my R&D background was helpful, but it would also be good to kind of have an MBA because I had the R&D experience, but I felt I could kind of have more of the business tools, which would help my career development. And that's when I applied for my MBA in 2019, and I got an admit from NYU Stern School of Business. I started my MBA in 2019. It's a part-time MBA program, which means I was working when I was studying, and most of my classes are in either the evenings or the weekends. So kind of moving forward to 2020, which is last year, I switched my jobs again, and now I joined Bristol Myers Squibb, which is a pharmaceutical company. And my role in the team is Senior Manager of Strategy and Operations. So what do I do in my current role? My current role is kind of twofold. I develop the R&D and manufacturing strategy. So at a high level, I kind of see what pharmaceutical products do we have in our company's portfolio. I look at what other competitors are there in the market, and I help the company kind of strategize on which products to prioritize over a 10-year or a 5 to 10 year horizon. I also kind of look at the manufacturing strategy, which is look at the various manufacturing sites our company has across the globe and decide where to produce which product, how to ensure kind of product supply and kind of avoid any disruptions to the product network. So that's my primary role. So with that said, let me pause here. So that's a pretty quick high-level overview of my career so far. Let me pause and I'll give you the opportunity to ask me any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Sai. Thank you so much. That was really an insightful, talk, and the transition from biotech towards management is clearly visible there. So we'll take the questions later, and now I want to invite Deepti Reddy. Hi Deepti. Deepti is a 2014 graduate of NIT Warangal, and currently she's part of the general management at Thermo Fisher Scientific. So Deepti, all over to you.
Thank you so much. One moment to share my screen. Okay. So my slide, as you can see, is not as pretty as Sai Ganesh's in any way. But I have a very similar story to his. And just to quickly walk you through that, like you said, I did graduate from NIT Warangal in 2014. And all through my 4 years at college, I was pretty sure that I would end up being a scientist, doing that core academic research in a lab somewhere in the world. But I did know that I wanted to end up in the US pretty soon. Just because I grew up there as a kid, I have a lot of family there. So I knew that after college, immediately, I did want to go back to the US and get my master's. I was at the moment, although I was sure I wanted to end up in R&D, I wasn't able to commit, that 4 or 5 years of doing a PhD. So in my mind, a master's was that next big step where I could just have a feel out for the different fields within R&D itself, just so I can narrow it down on my focus area. So taking a step back, actually in 2013, I interned at Texas A&M, and actually through the help of Rohit Kongari. So that was our first year for that Texas A&M summer internship. So I was very fortunate to have that opportunity. And the three of us, we spent 3 months over there doing academic research in Rohit's lab. And I don't want to get into the specifics of what that research was, but I'm happy to cover that in the Q&A if you'd like. So moving forward to 2014, so just graduated NIT Warangal, I moved to the US, and I actually started my master's in biotechnology at Columbia University. I focused in on infectious diseases, particularly molecular biology and immunology for HIV. So I did a lot of graduate assistantships at the Columbia University Medical Center, just trying to get as much experience as I could before I applied for full-time as soon as I graduated the program. So after my graduation from Columbia, I moved to Washington, D.C., where I worked for a nonprofit organization. So that's the Henry M. Jackson Foundation. And they basically are a contractor for the US government. So they do all the academic research, even clinical research for the US government in partnership with multiple universities in the Washington, D.C. area. So I worked over there for close to 3 years doing academic research on malaria, again, that focus on infectious diseases. And my role was actually a research assistant. So I was still sort of down the food chain, but it was good experience for me because it helped me understand exactly what the scope of work was for someone who wanted to be in academic research without a PhD. And it became clear to me that if I had to progress in that field, I did need to get my higher studies. So towards the end of my time at Henry Jackson, I had two choices, either to go ahead with a PhD, so I moved down that research path, or go down another path of my choice. And I spoke to a lot of people, and to be honest, those 3 years were great. My project was amazing, but I did not have a good work-life balance. I was spending a lot of time in the lab, and money is not everything, but I was making peanuts and spending 6 days of my life just doing research, almost 12, 14 hours every day. So that definitely impacted, my mental peace, my personal life. And, I knew that at any cost, I still wanted to stick to healthcare. I was and still am passionate about biotechnology and the healthcare industry in general. So I thought about ways of how can I still be close to this field without having to do that science in a wet lab. And for me, management seemed like the best way to go because in that current role, I was a lab manager. So I was getting reports from all our scientists, maybe not the technical pieces, but a lot of that operational and logistical pieces. So I really enjoyed working with people, managing these different tasks and making sure that our lab was running smoothly. And then that role really transitioned into more opportunities in terms of managing our finances, writing our SOPs, just more from a strategy perspective of how do you keep this lab running and ensure we're funded so that the PhD and postdocs can actually do their science. So that's when I got that taste, a little taste of management, and when I realized, okay, I think MBA is that next step, and hopefully that last step in my career, right? I don't want to keep going back to graduate school. So in 2018, I chose to enroll into the Kelley School of Business, which is at the Indiana University Bloomington, for a couple of reasons. IU Bloomington has a lot of partnerships with healthcare companies in the Midwest region. And I was looking to move out of the East Coast. So that worked for me. And then when you are applying for MBA in the US, typically you get some sort of scholarship. So fortunately, IU Bloomington gave me a full scholarship. So from a funding perspective, that made sense to me as well. So just keeping all of that in mind, and also the culture and the people at the school, I really connected with them. The way it was very collaborative and friendly, and I really thrive in an environment as such. So that's why that school was a good fit for me. So I graduated this May, actually, one of that COVID classes. And I actually majored in marketing and business analytics. And my reason for choosing marketing was I really like that focus of communication and trying to connect the dots when you're telling a story. Now, having said that, that does not fit solely under marketing. That's something that you have to do in any type of management role that you have. But as I was doing all my projects within business school, I really like that upstream marketing role where you're deciding the strategy of how you're going to communicate with your customers. So that's how I majored in those two fields. And analytics, of course, is a booming topic. It's always good to have skill set in that, no matter which field you're in and which function you're in. So the summer of business school, I interned at Baxter in one of their leadership development programs. And I can answer questions about that a little later. I know I'm running short here at time. But currently I'm at Thermo Fisher Scientific. I just started last July in their leadership development program, which is specific for general management. So the goal, the purpose of me joining this program is it gives me the opportunity to rotate between different divisions within our company and different functions. So I get 3 rotations, 8 months each. And for my first rotation, I'm in a marketing strategy role as well as a corporate strategy role. So I have 2 different projects. And then in my 2 other rotations, I will have the opportunity to try out different other functions. So I might get a finance project, I might get an operations project. And selfishly, the reason I chose this program was as I graduated last May, although I majored in marketing, I wasn't satisfied with the scope of work that I did at Baxter and what marketing had offered to me. So I wanted to test out what else was there. And this LDP program gives you that opportunity to test it out in a more accelerated pace. So let's see down the road when I graduate from this program in next July, which function I'll end up with. But at this moment, I am leaning more towards that strategy sort of roles at a corporate level. Okay, with that, happy to answer any questions. Back to you, Ashwin.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Deepti. That was really insightful. So again, the transition from, biotechnology to, management, I'm pretty sure we're going to have a lot of questions on that. So anybody having any questions, you can, put it in the chat or you can raise your hand and then we can, go ahead and mute you and ask you questions. So first question we have is from Nandini. Nandini, please go ahead with your question.
Hi everyone. My question is for Deepti. I kind of really relate to the thing you talked about like not making enough money in academia research. Like that is one genuine worry I have when I think about a career in research. So I was kind of comparing academia research, industry research, and the consulting roles in, say, the biotech industry. So could you elaborate like comparatively on the three of them, as in pay scale, work-life balance, and a little bit on maybe the job profile?
Yeah.
Uh,
So I I can't speak too much to industrial research, and I'm sure Sai Ganesh is a better person to talk to you about consulting here. But for academic research, yes, it is tough. And like I said, I was a research assistant, so still down that food chain. So if you were to do, research after your PhD, that definitely increases your salary. Um, and by how much, that depends on the type of research you're doing. It depends on your institution, the program that you just graduated from. So there are multiple different factors. But yes, as a research assistant, you're making the bare minimum. um, for and then to coming to consulting, definitely you will make a little more than if you were doing academic research, but that also depends on your credentials. So are you doing consulting after you have a master's or an MBA, or are you doing it fresh out of undergrad? That also changes your pay scale significantly. um, then coming to the scope of work, so I can share what I was doing as a research assistant, and maybe that will help you, and then Sai Ganesh can add in what he's doing for consulting. So I actually assisted a lot of the postdocs in our lab. So they would strategize the protocol, the timeline, what their goal is. And then they would give that SOP and that protocol to me and say, hey, this is by when I need results, and these are the expectations. So I wasn't using my brain, I was just the hands doing the work. And I think that really motivated me of saying, hey, I want to be the driver here. I don't want to be doing someone else's work, number one. And then number two, like I mentioned, from a timing perspective, I unfortunately was working with malaria, where that cell culture had to be done like every few hours, otherwise our cells died. And I had to take care of them over the weekends. So that's again something you're doing as a research assistant, right? You're doing all of those um, smaller tasks rather than the higher level strategy.
Sai, if you have anything to add on this.
Yeah, I mean, I can add my own take on it. So to your question, yes, academia does pay the least. There is no two ways about it. I think the question you need to ask yourself is, if you decide to go into academia, it probably has to be for the love of science and for the love of what you do. It cannot be for making money. I mean, the top research professors and all those people make good money, but with that said, the average academic researcher does not make a lot of money. And that was also one of my motivations for not continuing with a PhD. So that's one thing. Coming to industry research, it does pay more than academia. So you will make enough money that you won't have to you will make enough money on industry research. Um, so that so that is one reason why I chose to go to the industry. And consulting is, I would say the answer is it depends, because based on your role, based on how soon you can kind of progress in your career, you could be making a lot more money. But with that said, the skill set needed for consulting is different from the skill set needed for industry research. And it also depends on your interest. So those are other factors, but you're right, industry definitely pays you a lot more than academia.
All right, thank you, thank you. So next question we have is from Simran.
Hello, hi Dipti and hi Sai Ganesh. Thank you both for such an amazing talk. I think it was really interesting. I am working in the lab right now, and I totally get what Dipti is saying. Your cells, your organoids are like your baby. You don't care if it's weekend or midnight, you have to be there. And I know that I want to do a PhD, but I am not sure if I want to stay in academia. So, what do you think? Dipti, how getting into industry after PhD would add value to it rather than getting into PhD before getting to industry before PhD. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, my personal motto is always like try it out first, don't say no in advance. And that may be because I'm indecisive to some extent. I would say if you can and if you have that ability to, work a year, maybe in the industry, test it out, definitely go ahead and do that. I really tried hard to, switch roles into industry out of academia when I was a research assistant because I wanted to try it out myself. But it was hard if you did not have the right connections or if you didn't have that previous industry experience, it was tough to get into. So I felt a little stuck in that academic area. So I would say if you are leaning more towards industry, start looking for opportunities now. Start speaking to people who are already in the industry, who know it, who have experienced it. If you can find someone who transitioned out of the industry, that helps too. That's my personal preference, and then it's up to you, Simran. It's like how Saiganesh said, right? If you know what you want, what you're passionate about, what your priorities are, right? If money is not that priority, it's down your list. Use that as your motivation when you're thinking about what that next role should be.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Sai
Yeah.
Ganesh, do you have anything to say on that?
Simran, sorry, can you repeat your question? I didn't catch that.
So now I was just wondering if there's a difference when you get into industry after PhD or before PhD. What do you think?
So when you say get into the industry, do you mean like R&D type roles?
Mostly so far, yes. But I think during my PhD I'll realize more. But for now, I'm super excited about research and I would like to stay in it.
Yeah, so I think as Deepti said, it is definitely so with them. So I went into the industry with a master's, and one of the biggest challenges which I faced was it's very hard to kind of get into the industry with just like an academic experience with a master's. So for me, that was a big challenge, and it took a lot of effort to get beyond that and get my first job. With a PhD, I mean, I don't have a PhD, but I know a lot of people who do, and I feel it's much easier to get into R&D after you have a PhD because that's the best qualification you could have. And second thing which I experienced is that as you think about your career progression, without a PhD, it is much harder. Like you may get into the industry, but a PhD kind of gives you the credential to move up faster. So that is another thing which you may want to keep in mind.
Great. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you, both of you. I'm sure this must have been a doubt for many of the people here. So we'll go forward with the next question, which is coming from Krishna. Krishna, please go ahead with your question.
Hi, thanks both for the very nice talk. I have a question for Sai. So you mentioned that you had the feeling that with a master's degree, like there is like you can only progress so much in R&D in industry. How do you feel now as a more like in the management side? What proportion of people are there like who have a PhD and then transitioned into management? And what proportion of people are just coming from a management background? And are also like, are there people who have both? Or do you think that one way or the other might have some advantages?
Yeah, so in my current role, the team, the function which I work with, there are not a lot of people have PhDs, and even the even the people who have PhDs, it doesn't really help them too much. Like after a point, it's more about how you work within the company, how you kind of carry yourself, and how you get the work done, basically. So that matters more. A lot of people in the line of work I do, they do have an MBA though. So I feel to get into the role, the MBA, I'm sorry, to get into the role, the MBA definitely helps. But PhD, not so much. I mean, it's a good to have. It's always good to understand kind of the scientific background when you talk about business problems. But I don't think it's a requirement. Like a very small
And
percentage of people I work with have a PhD, and I don't think it really makes a difference.
what about, do you have any idea about the people who are more into the strategy? So like in a very big company like BMS, there are also like people who drive, okay, this is the next research area because this is where the market lies. What about there? I guess there are also people then with scientific background, or they need people with scientific background to make those decisions. How does it look in those areas?
Yeah, so in those areas, yes, there is slightly more PhD background people. And even then, like, I mean, even when you think about the strategy role, right, like there are multiple functions which come under that. So people who do like core R&D, they do have PhDs, no doubt about that. But people who kind of look into the future, kind of see how the company should progress, PhD is a nice to have, but a lot of people, at least in my experience, don't really need a PhD. So to answer your question, I would say maybe 10 to 20% of people have PhDs at like senior management level, but apart from that, not too many.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. I would just want to add on to Krishna's question. So, as her question was more of from a PhD point of view, so I would want to ask to both of you, as you both mentioned that both are in some sort of a strategy role. So, how does a background in biotechnology help you? When you're in the middle of that role. So, if you could just throw some light on that.
I can go first. I think having a biotech degree definitely helps. I think I have no doubt about that. So like I mean, I've told you about my career progression, right? So having a undergrad and masters in biotech or biotech related definitely helps get into the industry. In my current role, it is super helpful to have a degree in biotech because as you kind of think about the business like challenges which a company is facing, one of the lens to look at the problem is also from an R&D point of view. Like once you have like multiple points of view to look at a problem, it gives you better perspective than other people in the team. And having that R&D background experience, at least in my opinion, definitely helps.
Yeah, and completely agree. The role that I'm in currently, the company I'm in actually, we manufacture a lot of the daily supplies and equipment that researchers use across all industries, not just healthcare. So coming from a lab and having that experience, I know what the importance of that product and the value that, a scientist needs to use that product for. So that helps when you're putting together this story and messaging to sell that product to customers. So definitely that having that biotechnology experience and understanding helps. But like Sairaam mentioned earlier, if you are trying to transition to into a more consulting or a management role, obviously having those basic business skills and knowledge helps. So a biotech background, although is a great addition, it's not a requirement if you are interested in joining management in healthcare companies.
All right. All right. Thank you. Thanks for that answer. I guess that would be very helpful for people who are, looking for a transition. So the next question that we have is from Sesha Sai. If you could just unmute yourself.
Sure. Hi. Thanks for the chance. Thanks, Sairaam, and thanks, Deepti, for the presentation. I have a quick question, especially for Sairaam. I know he's worked for 3 years in a biopharma firm, and then he worked for a consulting firm, and then he made a switch to MBA. I just want to understand how difficult was this transitioning, and what was the. I know you did mention a reason that there was a ceiling bar. Since you don't have a PhD, that's why you moved to consulting. But I just want to understand, uh, being more focused on a not business domain but research domain, how quick or how what are the challenges you face to understand the business domain? How would you integrate yourself into a new culture, uh, and how would you able to deliver on your regular activities on your new job or over this period of time?
That's a great question. So I definitely faced challenges when I moved. So I worked in as an R&D scientist for a year before moving to consulting, right? So I definitely faced a lot of challenges in my first year as a consultant, and that is primarily because like the focus is very different in consulting from the industry. So in the industry or even in academia, there's a lot of emphasis on attention to detail on your scientific results, kind of the focus is very different. Like it's more science oriented. It's more about solving scientific problems. Whereas when it comes to consulting, like they are not looking for perfection. The focus is more upon how do we best solve the client's problems in a very given period of time, like say whatever the duration of the project is, like 6 months, 8 months, whatever the duration is. So the focus is very different, and there's a lot more emphasis on things like, at least when you start off in consulting, the emphasis is on making presentations, making very thorough Excel analysis, which is different from R&D. So those were kind of the challenges I faced initially because I didn't really know what the expectations were. It took me some time to get used to it. So I think that is the major challenge which I faced when I moved to consulting. But with that said, when I moved from consulting back to the industry or back to more strategy-oriented roles in the industry, the transition has been far more smooth because I now have that R&D background in the back of my head, and my current role is very similar to what I was doing in consulting. So, except I'm doing it more in the company itself, in-house now. So that transition has been a lot smoother than my initial transition like 4 or 5 years ago.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sai. Thank you, Sai, for taking that question. Next question we have is from Srilipi. Srilipi, so if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question. All right, all right. So the question mentioned in the chat is that how hard is it to get into industry after getting a master's in US?
I can take the question and then Deepti, you can chime in. So the short answer is it was pretty hard for me. Um, so after my master's, at least when I was doing my master's, I applied for like, I want to say 500 or 600 different roles. I got maybe like 6 interviews and I got 1 job. So long story short, it is very hard. I'm not gonna say, and I'm not gonna lie. And this was back in 2014. So fast forward to 2020, if you're considering a similar career, um, getting a job, one is hard, but as someone coming from India, there is a lot more visa restrictions. There's a lot more immigration challenges which people face coming in now. And if for anyone who's planning to come to the US, I think you guys should definitely keep that in the back of your mind. I mean, I don't want to go into the immigration challenges now because like this time is probably not enough, but I'm happy to connect offline. But the things now from an immigration standpoint are very different. So it's definitely challenging. So that's kind of my take. Deepti, I don't know if you have a different take on that.
No, it's same thing. I faced the same situation, except I did not get any offers. So I ended up in academia. But yes, after my master's, I applied to many jobs. And it's just hard. It's hard because they see that, you've done your undergrad in India, so they're not sure about the experience and knowledge that you bring. And also, you don't have a lot of experience, right, doing research at NIT, at least at the time I was there, just because of the lack of facilities that we had. So, even though I did have that Texas A&M research, it still wasn't helpful. So I would say, it's hard. Is it impossible? No. Clearly, Sairaam is an example of that. But keep that in mind when you're looking for opportunity. That's your indication that don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you are interested in industry, obviously apply, but also apply for other roles outside, where you may have a quicker turnaround time. You may get more offers and more options. um, and then, just to add to that, I would say it's not easy when you're just moving from a different country. You don't know a lot of people. But when you're in your master's program, speak to a lot of people. You think that you don't need to network with people when you're in research, but that's sort of a hindsight learning for me. Is I should have met with more people, not outside academic research. I should have, gone to these networking sessions or speaker sessions where I would interact with people, maybe in the industry or in some other roles, and just learn from what their experience has been. And, if you make a good connection, maybe they're able to help you in that job process after you graduate.
All right. Thank you, Deepti. I guess that was a very great point that you said about networking. I guess this thing that the organizers have put forward is one initiative which has networking as at its basis. So I guess we have some time for a couple of more questions. So if we have any other questions, yes, Ashwin.
Maybe I can ask a similar question which has been asked by Simran and all. So first of all, thanks a lot, Sairam and Deepti, for the nice talk. One question I've been asked a lot of times by some students is that, how about after doing a PhD, will my opportunities change in country like US or any other place? I really don't have much experience because I myself am doing a PhD right now. So would you guys, based on your friends' experience who had PhD, could they enter into R&D a little bit more easily as compared to, entering as a master or something? Because I think, Sairam, you already mentioned that there is always a ceiling, right? So could you guys throw some light how easier it becomes after a PhD?
Yeah, I can only talk based off of what my friends' experiences and my peers. I certainly think it's easier because you number one have the main requirement, which is that credentials of being a PhD. You may have some papers and publications to show that you have that knowledge and skills. And then you also build those connections. So I definitely think it's easier than just graduating from masters and trying to get into it. And like Sairan mentioned before, the type of roles that you can apply for with a PhD, that also you have more options, better paying roles than if you were just a master's student.
Yeah, I think Deepti pretty much covered everything I had to say. I mean, when you have a PhD, it definitely becomes easier for R&D roles. Like with a master's, you may come in as like an entry-level person. As a PhD, you would probably come in 2 or 3 levels above that person. And as a master's person, it takes like several years to get to the same levels. So having a PhD, especially for R&D type roles, is definitely helpful. So
Thanks a lot, both of you.
All right. So I think we can take just a one more quick question if we have. Yes, Shreya, please go ahead with your question.
So, hello everyone. My question is sort of an extension to what Aniruddha had asked, and I was wanting to know to what extent would you recommend a master's degree in biotechnology for a fresher, who's wanting to be in biotech but not exactly in a lab? That is what I want to know.
So when you say you want to be in biotech, what do you want to do in biotech? If not a lab, I'm just curious. Like I just want to understand your question more.
Yeah. So, recently this whole data-driven thing is coming up in biotechnology as well. So I've read about this whole digital medicine. So that is one area. And again, consulting is, I think, the best of them all. Let's face it, in terms of the pay scale and everything. So these two have been in my mind, but having not been placed yet, or I'm still confused. Should I like work and then go do an MBA eventually, or do a master's and seek something similar in future?
Hmm. So I think, so first thing, you're right. I mean, analytics is a very upcoming field. I mean, if you feel that the working in a lab is not what you want to do, analytics is definitely a good area to go in. And I do know that a lot of companies, a lot of biotech companies are heavily investing in the analytics field. So that is definitely an up and coming area. So that's a good career option, no doubt about that. Um, Whether it makes sense to do an MBA or do a master's, I think it completely depends on your career preference. If you want to go into consulting, an MBA might be better. If you want to go into data analytics, I would say a master's in an analytics program would be more helpful. So those are kind of decisions you need to make. But I feel depending on what you want to do, your kind of the next step should kind of depend on that. Um, so that's kind of my initial thoughts. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally. I think I did take some insights.
All right. I think we have just a one more question. So I guess this should be our last question. We have another question from Vatsal.
Well, it's not more. It's more of a comment on Shreya's question, which she asked. So I think if I understand her question right, she wants to know uh, if she wants to be in biotech industry and not want to work in a lab, she would she need a master's degree or not? And I think the answer to that is yes, 100%. Because if you want to be in the biotech industry with the course and curriculum and a BTech degree that we get from NIT Warangal, it's just not enough. So at some point of time, maybe you can enter into I guess like a small role in the industry, but you will face challenges progressing your career. So if you know that you want to be in this field of work, I mean, I would suggest that you do a master's. And I'm completely basing this on a lot of experiences of my friends and my the people I know. So if that answers your question.
Okay, so I would just like to ask you something more. Um, how about instead of not doing an MS, you just move to working for a pharmaceutical company right after BTech, and then eventually do an MBA? So does that compensate for an MS which you were stressing upon, or
Look,
it's unresolved?
it's not about compensating. Like MS gives you certain skills which is completely different from MBA. So you have to look at what you want to do. Like if you want to go into the core science, I think MS would definitely be an advantage that MBA will not give you. But if you want to go into management or project managing or different stuff like that, then I would suggest that you do a MBA, because doing a MS would not give you that skills. So I mean, just like think about what you want to do, and then make a decision, because definitely another degree would help your career progression quite a bit, because BTech biotechnology, in my opinion, would not be enough uh, to sustain in the biotech industry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vatsal. Thank you so much for your insights. So I guess we stop here. We would like to thank Sai and Deepti for their insights on, mainly transitioning from biotech to management positions, to jobs, and to, connecting biotechnology with the job profile, and mainly networking. So thank you guys. And I am pretty sure that, your experiences and insights would help a lot of people who have connected with us. So thank you so much.